Still on that, President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday delivering the State of the Nation address amid great pressure to improve the lot of millions of South Africans whose lives have been upended by the devastating effects of COVID-19 and, of course, the declining economy. He announced various measures to help alleviate poverty, inequality and unemployment. But now to examine if they'll change lives, we look at the figures on the ground, tracking the progress of development and service delivery gaps in South Africa over the years. And Bernstein is a founder and executive director of the Center for Development and Enterprise. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Hi, it's a pleasure.
So the president announced that 18 million people of our population received grants for the first time, or more than usual. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Is there evidence then that the social costs of COVID-19 have some sort of relief on households, these measures that have been put in place?
Look, the available evidence is that these measures have helped people. I think we're only going to know a lot more after COVID is lifted or we sort of get out of this situation. But the most important thing is that our devastating unemployment situation, about 10.3 million people pre-COVID, has got much worse. The president said 1.78 million more people were unemployed. So we're definitely over 11 million people unemployed. And this is the key thing, because this is sustainable. If you can get a job, you can get into the economy. But the kind of handouts of the 350 Rand that we've been doing is very little for people. And it's really just to help tide them over. So I don't think we should be focusing all that much there.
And we'll talk about unemployment in just a moment, but I also want to look at what was a big thing, what everybody was focusing on, the vaccine rollout. The financial costs of the vaccine rollout, when we balance it, will the socio-economic fallout of those whom obviously it'll take longer, that's the majority that we're speaking of, the poor, to receive it, will that have an even greater effect on the situation we're in?
Look, the most important thing South Africa has to do today is to acquire vaccines and efficiently, effectively roll out the vaccinations for about 40 million people. We have to do that as fast as possible, whatever it costs. I don't think we should be debating the cost. Obviously, we don't want corruption and we want to do this as cost effectively as possible, but we can't get our economy going again and get people back to a normal life unless they're vaccinated.
And I guess that's what I'm saying, is there a balance? And that's what I'm saying, is there a balance? While we're counting rands and cents and saying, well, you know, money is being wasted in the vaccine rollout, but what happens to people who are not first in line to get that vaccine in the meantime? I mean, what are their lives going to look like, those households?
Well, they're going to be as they are now, very compromised. People are vulnerable to getting the disease. Many people are not working or working fully at the moment. That's why our unemployment rate is going up. And that's why I think the cost of the vaccination is the least of our concerns. It's the speed. It's acquiring enough vaccines. And that was not all that convincing in the speech last night.
Now, the president announcing the extension of the COVID-19 social grant, including the TERS scheme. So given that almost half of the households depend on grants rather than salaries, is another 3 months really going to be able to lift them out of poverty? As you say, the situation is getting worse. If we look at places like the Eastern Cape and Limpopo, I mean, a lot of those households are of single-person households, a lot of them women who've been badly affected by the loss of jobs.
Look, the TERS scheme is until, I think, the end of March. And that's for people who were employed and who are not employed now because their place of employment is closed or because they can't go to work. So these are very temporary stopgaps. What we should be focusing on is how we get the economy going again and how we recover from the pandemic and start building the economy and creating jobs, how we build a more labor-intensive economy as well. So I think those are the issues that are most important if we're talking about this year and next year and the next. How do we get growth going again, and how is the president's economic recovery plan panning out? Is it working? Where are we? And is this going to be sufficient? Is it a credible approach to rebuilding South Africa's economy? Because you have to appreciate the crisis that we're in, where all the crises we had pre-COVID are just much worse now. So we have a massive fiscal crisis, we have an unemployment crisis, and our economy is stagnant and has shrunk, in fact, during the COVID period. So we are in deep, deep trouble, and all of this translates into a social crisis. But the only way to deal with this in a sustainable fashion is to start taking the bold steps that are needed to get our economy going again, to get investors saying, I'm going to risk money in this economy because they're not doing it now.
I mean, education has suffered, so as a foundation, what should we be doing immediately? And if we're told that 84% of children in rural areas, for instance, face multidimensional poverty compared to children in urban areas, shouldn't we be segregating our policies or having that kind of lens to our approach in order to avoid cheap labor heritage and generational poverty continuing?
Look, I'm very worried about education. All the international evidence shows that the kids are going to suffer for years and years and years if they're not back at school. So getting the schools open as quickly as possible is absolutely essential. I'm also concerned the available information shows that the school feeding scheme, we normally feed pre-COVID about 9 million learners every single day, but this is not happening now, and I think important questions should be asked as to why apparently about 2 million children are not getting their sort of school food at school, even when the schools are closed. So I think that's really important. We've got to get everyone back to school. We've got to do that as safely as possible. But the evidence is that people can go back to school, and we should be getting people back to school as quickly as possible. And
such a pity we have run out of time, especially given the fact that we are awaiting an announcement, of course, on Sunday about the reopening of schools. But we'll have our eye on that. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Anne Bernstein is a founder and director of Centre for Development and Enterprise. Right, let's take a quick look at your weather now.